he has something that he'd like to tell you, and without further ado, Kevin.
I'm not quite as tall. First of all, thank you everyone for allowing me to come and speak, Thomas. Thank you for allowing me to come up here as well. I just want to say briefly, so this is a very design-oriented crowd, and the topic of tonight is design. I think probably everybody has their own definition for what is good design, but for me, it's creating a good experience. Design is about a good experience. Good coffee, that's what we're focused on. We're focused on delivering little moments of happiness or creating good experiences. So, thank you for allowing me to come up. The coffee that we provided is in the back of the room, and if you're interested in finding out more about what we do, please come find me or talk about us. Thank you again.
So for our next speaker, it is a particular pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Henrik Fisker. I'm sure you've heard of other boys that wanted to be cowboys and firemen and the like. Well, I wanted to be a car designer. I have a substantial portfolio. In fact, I'm going to have to talk with Mr. Fisker. I think he uses some of my designs. I believe he uses round wheels. I use round wheels in all of my cars. Some of you may have heard of Mr. Fisker from his more recent adventures, but he's been in the automotive industry for quite a number of years and is, I think, the preeminent Danish automotive designer, at least in this century, probably also in the last century. He's responsible for fantastic designs, in my humble opinion, with Aston Martin, with BMW, the wonderful Z8, which James Bond drove at one point, I believe. And most notably, of course, recently the iconic and fantastic and very fast Fisker Karma. I'm sure you all heard Justin Bieber put his car to good use. But Mr. Fisker embodies for me and for a lot of other people Danish design on the international scene. And we're quite happy to have him here. We're honored and pleased to have him. So if you would, please help me welcome Mr. Henrik Fisker.
Take this off as well here. Thank you very much. It's really great to be here. I will say first that I can confirm something here tonight. Since I just arrived from Beijing via London, it was a 22-hour flight. And the reason I seem so energetic is because first I had that delicious ice cream, and I've just finished 2 of these Copenhagen Wienerbrød, as I call it, which seems to work pretty good so far. I might need another one in about half an hour. So anyway, design work versus market. I thought I will just give a little quick background about how I got into design. And of course, growing up in Denmark, it wasn't always as easy as it seems like today, perhaps, for some people. And because, of course, in Denmark, there is no car industry. So when I went into my teacher and said I wanted to be a car designer, my teacher said there is nothing called a car designer. You can become an engineer or something else. And of course, instead of writing down my homework in my notebook, I used to draw cars. And some of these sketches, as you see up here, maybe some earlier ones, these are later ones. And of course, I got into trouble for that in Denmark. However, in Denmark, they are a little more lenient to a certain point. There was, of course, a point where when you're still 15, 16 years old and you draw cars and still don't do your homework, you get into trouble. But finally, I was done with school, and I got my first job, and even there I drew cars, where I got into trouble as well. And finally my dad said, why don't you write a letter to a car company? And I thought the closest car company obviously is Volvo in Sweden. So I wrote a letter to them, and they recommended an American design school called Art Center College of Design. And I was extremely excited about that. In fact, there is a school here, the school is here in Pasadena, here in California. And that's kind of where, for me, the first merge of Danish design and American design came together for me. And I started in the branch in Switzerland at that time, which was still the American school, and finished that in 1989. And then I started at BMW. And that was extremely exciting. And there it was very fortunate to be able to design the BMW Z8, and it really was kind of luck as the summer vacation came out in around August, and the development chief wanted to see how the old BMW 507 was that Elvis Presley was driving when he was in Germany as a soldier, how that would look. It was in the 50s. How would that look if it was recreated in the modern day? So I said I would like to design that car, and most of the other people rather go on vacation because it was August and it was 6 weeks of vacation. Something that I think not many people are used to here in America, but that's how it is in Europe. So I forgave that and stayed at BMW during the vacation and dreamed up this car, which later then was extremely excited about getting into a James Bond movie as well. It was not quite as exciting when I went to the premiere of the James Bond movie, and it was cut in half, and there was almost no, car chase or anything in the film. But I had a great time at BMW, and of course that led me then to Aston Martin, where I got to design the DB9 and also the V8 Vantage. And that was also an extremely exciting time, because Aston Martin, when I arrived, were only building worldwide 1,300 cars. And I remember I was sent to America on a trip to meet a marketing team over here, because the expectation was that the American market needed to be the biggest market. And I remember meeting a few people over here, and I would talk to them about Aston Martin, and they go, "You mean Austin?" And I said, "No, I mean Aston Martin." So they didn't really even remember Aston Martin at that point, and it's really not that long time ago. So this was really an interesting thing where design versus market. The market in the USA, except if you're a real car fanatic this was back in the year 2000, only about 13 years ago, a lot of normal people really did not really know Aston Martin as a brand. So it was something where we have to think about how could we get people again aware of Aston Martin. And part of it also was that my days at BMW, as I just mentioned before, BMW had made a great deal with Mr. Bond. And that was that Mr. Bond was driving BMWs. So the new generation around the world and also in America didn't really associate James Bond with Aston Martin, so that was something they lost as well a little bit at those times. So we decided to kind of bring back the Aston Martin name, to create a new Aston Martin that we were going to launch at the 2003 Detroit Auto Show, and that was the V8 Vantage. Now, the thing was at that time that Ford Motor Company owned Aston Martin, and they didn't have, or they had a lot of money, but they didn't want to give Aston Martin too much money because they were only making 1,300 cars a year. And that's probably what Ford makes a day. So obviously that market potential, even if they would grow it to double or triple, would still be tiny. And the idea was to grow Aston Martin to triple of that volume. So I had very little money to try and do this show car prototype. And that kind of led me to an interesting journey and sort of my first experience of doing something entrepreneurial. I was at Geneva Auto Show back in, I think it was 2001. And I was looking for some, different people that could perhaps make show cars, and normally they're done in Europe or in the US. And there was this one guy over in the corner that showed a strange car. And I was talking to him, and I said, where did you make this car? And he said, well, I have a company in India where I make it. And he said, I can make these cars extremely cheap. And I said, well, how cheap can I make it? And he said, he can do it for this and that. And it was exactly the budget I had, which were about a quarter of what a normal prototype cost. So I said, well, I'd like to see where you're doing your work. So I flew to India, to Bombay, and we drove out to sort of his working area, and it wasn't kind of what I expected normally, you know, from Europe or US. It was sort of a little bit out in the slums, and there was no real lighting, there was no air conditioning, and when I asked to go to the toilet, I was asked to go behind, you know, the place and find a place to, you know, do what I had to do. So I said, look, you know, I can't do this here unless you have decent toilets, you have lighting, and you have air conditioning. So I said, I'll give you $10,000 more on top of the price of the prototype. You put that in. He says, yes, deal. So we did that. So we started making the car in 2002, and everything went extremely well. I sent some people over there. Until then, we were about 5-6 weeks before the car was supposed to be done, and I flew, I was flying every 4 weeks to India, and finally 5-6 weeks before we were almost done, I flew to the US preparing for Detroit Auto Show, and I was in Detroit a couple of weeks before and waiting for the car to arrive, and I got a call that there was a problem. They had used some welding and some stuff, and long story short, there was maybe some little welding stuff that had happened, some little you know, sparks and things, and long story short, the car was not really going to happen. And so I said, well, you got to do something, I need the car here. And he says, well, if you have a few $1,000s more, we can finish it. We bring another 100 people in and finish it, and they'll work day and night. And I said, okay, do it. And he said, well, there's only one problem. The car won't be there before Sunday morning early. And the problem was the car had to get into the Detroit Auto Show at Friday night. So I had to go in and plea with the Detroit Auto Show's organizers. But that's also where I kind of felt it was sort of American to sort of, you have the underdog coming in. I said, look, I'm working for this car company, it's Aston Martin. I know we have to get the car in on Friday morning, but it won't